The afternoon sun filtered through the smudged windows of Rosie's diner, casting long golden bars across the checkered linoleum floor. The diner smelled of coffee, bacon grease, and pie crust. A bell above the door chimed irregularly, and the red vinyl booths bore the patched scars of countless meals and conversations. Maya Chen moved between the tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had memorized every crack in the floor, every wobble in every chair. She was 23 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and eyes that held the deeper fatigue of someone who had been running on fumes for years. Her uniform was clean but faded, the pink fabric worn thin at the elbows, and her name tag sat slightly crooked on her chest. She carried a coffee pot in one hand and a stack of laminated menus in the other, her movements automatic, her smile professionally warm but never quite reaching her eyes. The Tuesday lunch rush had thinned to its usual trickle of regulars and stragglers. Old Mr. Patterson sat at the counter, working his way through a tuna melt and the sports section with the methodical patience of someone who had nowhere else to be. 2 college students occupied a corner booth, textbooks spread between them, their coffee cups empty but their conversation animated enough that Maya knew they'd stay another hour at least. The kitchen radio played something soft and forgettable, and the cook, a barrel-chested man named Frank who had worked at Rosie's longer than Maya had been alive, hummed along tunelessly as he scraped down the grill. Maya had just finished wiping down table 7 when the bell above the door chimed again. She looked up out of habit, her professional smile already forming, and watched as a family entered. A middle-aged couple, a teenage boy with headphones draped around his neck, and an elderly woman moving slowly with the aid of a carved wooden cane. The grandmother was small and elegant despite her years, dressed in a cardigan the color of lavender and wearing pearls that caught the afternoon light. Her white hair was styled in soft waves, and there was something about the way she held herself, straight-backed, dignified, that commanded attention without demanding it. "Sit anywhere you like," Maya called out, gesturing toward the empty section of the diner. The family chose a large booth near the window, the one with the best view of Main Street, where you could watch the slow parade of small-town life unfold. The hardware store across the street, the barber shop with its spinning pole, the flower shop with buckets of blooms crowding the sidewalk. The grandmother settled into her seat with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints had begun to betray them. Her grandson helped her remove her cardigan, draping it over the back of the booth with surprising gentleness. The mother, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and smile lines, opened her menu immediately, but the grandmother's attention drifted to the window, to something beyond it that Maya couldn't see. Maya approached with her notepad and pen, that professional smile fixed in place. "Welcome to Rosie's. Can I start you folks off with something to drink?" The father ordered sweet tea. The mother asked for water with lemon. The teenage boy wanted a Coke, and the grandmother requested hot tea with honey, her voice soft but clear, touched with an accent that Maya couldn't quite place. Something European, perhaps, worn smooth by decades in America but never entirely erased. "I'll get those right out," Maya said, jotting down the orders with the shorthand she developed over 2 years of serving tables. She was turning to leave when the grandmother's hand shot out with surprising speed, fingers wrapping around Maya's wrist. The touch was gentle but firm, and it sent an electric jolt through Maya's body. Not painful, but startling, like touching a doorknob after walking across carpet in winter. Maya froze, her breath catching, and looked down at the elderly woman whose pale blue eyes had suddenly focused on her with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through skin and bone to something deeper. "Your hand?" the grandmother whispered, and there was something in her voice, wonder, disbelief, recognition, that made Maya's heart begin to pound. "Let me see your hand." Before we continue with what happened next, if you're already hooked by this incredible story of mystery and family connection, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share more amazing true stories like Maya's. Now, let's see what the grandmother discovered. Maya glanced at the rest of the family. The mother had looked up from her menu, confusion crossing her features. The father had paused mid-reach for the sugar packets. The teenage boy had finally pulled his attention away from his phone, sensing that something unusual was happening, even if he couldn't yet name what. I should get your drinks?" Maya said, trying to gently extract her wrist, but the grandmother's grip tightened. "Please," the elderly woman said, and now her other hand came up, trembling slightly as it turned Maya's hand over, palm up, then palm down. Her thumb traced across the back of Maya's left hand, over the birthmark that Maya had carried since birth. A mark the size of a quarter, shaped like a crescent moon, darker than the surrounding skin, positioned between her thumb and forefinger. Maya had always been self-conscious about it. In high school, kids had asked if it was a tattoo or some kind of disease. She developed the habit of keeping that hand curled slightly, wearing rings that drew the eye away from it. The grandmother's eyes filled with tears that caught the afternoon light and turned it into prisms. Her hands, liver-spotted, veined with age, but steady now, held Maya's as if it were something precious and fragile. "This birthmark," she breathed, and her voice cracked on the words. "This exact birthmark. It runs in our family." The diner seemed to contract around them, the ambient sounds fading to a distant hum. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the warmth of the grandmother's hands, could smell her perfume. Something floral and old-fashioned, like the sachets her foster mother used to keep in drawers. I don't understand," Maya managed, though her throat had gone tight. "What do you mean?" The grandmother released one of Maya's hands to reach into her purse with fumbling urgency. She pulled out a wallet, opened it, and withdrew a photograph protected in plastic. Old, faded, the colors washed out in the way of pictures from decades past. She held it up with a shaking hand. The photograph showed a young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, with dark hair and eyes that seemed both familiar and foreign. She was laughing at the camera, one hand raised in a wave, and there, visible even in the aged photograph, was the birthmark. The same crescent moon shape, the same position between thumb and forefinger, the same size and darkness. "My daughter," the grandmother whispered. "My Elena. She disappeared 40 years ago. She was pregnant. She was 19 years old, and she vanished and we never." Her voice broke completely, and tears spilled down her weathered cheeks, following the grooves time had carved there. "We never found her. We never stopped looking." Maya's legs felt unsteady. The notepad slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor, but she barely heard it. The mother in the booth had gasped, her hand covering her mouth. The father had gone pale. The teenage boy stared with wide eyes, his phone forgotten on the table. "I was born here," Maya heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere distant. "In Riverside. I grew up in the foster system. They said my mother. They said she left me at the hospital. That she signed away her rights. That there was no family." The grandmother stood now, her movements suddenly fluid despite her age. Her cane forgotten as she reached for Maya with both hands, cupping her face. The old woman's eyes searched hers with desperate intensity, looking for something, finding something, recognizing something that Maya herself couldn't name. "How old are you?" the grandmother asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. 23. "My birthday is March 17th. The grandmother made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and pulled Maya into an embrace that smelled of lavender perfume and mothballs and something indefinably comforting. Maya stood rigid for a moment, her arms at her sides, her mind racing through a catalog of impossibilities. She'd spent her entire life believing she was alone, that her mother had been a teenager who hadn't wanted her, that her father was unknown, that she had come from nothing and no one. "March 17th, the grandmother repeated against Maya's shoulder. "Elena disappeared in June. She was 6 months pregnant. We called the police, we hired investigators, we put up posters all over 3 states. And then, nothing. As if she'd simply ceased to exist." She pulled back, her hands still gripping Maya's shoulders, her eyes still searching. "What do they call you?" "Maya. Maya Chen." "Chen?" The grandmother's brow furrowed. "But that's not. Elena's last name was Rossi. We're Italian. The birthmark, it's been in the Rossi family for 5 generations. My grandmother had it. I have one too smaller on my ankle, but Elena's was just like yours. Exactly like yours." Frank had emerged from the kitchen, spatula still in hand, drawn by the commotion. Mr. Patterson had swiveled on his stool at the counter, his tuna melt forgotten. The college students had looked up from their textbooks, sensing drama unfolding in real time. Maya's mind felt like it was splitting in two. One part remained the efficient waitress, aware that she was on the clock, that there were tables to serve, that she couldn't afford to lose this job. The other part, larger, louder, impossible to ignore, was spiraling through 23 years of questions that had never had answers. Who was her mother? Why had she been left? Did she have family somewhere, blood family, people who shared her features and her quirks, and maybe, just maybe, that hollow feeling of incompleteness that had shadowed her entire life? I don't know what to say, Maya whispered. This can't be real. The mother in the booth had begun to cry, quiet tears that she wiped away with a napkin. The father had pulled out his own phone, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. The teenage boy, Maya's possible cousin, if this impossible thing was true, looked between his grandmother and Maya with an expression of dawning wonder. "We need to talk," the grandmother said, her voice stronger now, steadier. "We need to sit down properly, not here, not like this. There's so much to tell you. So much you need to know about Elena, about our family, about what happened." She paused, her hands still holding Maya's. "My name is Rosa Rossi. This is my son Antonio and his wife Jennifer, and that's my grandson Marco. And if you are who I think you are, who I know you are, then you're my granddaughter. You're the baby we lost when we lost Elena." The bell above the door chimed again. A family of 4 entered, looking around for seating, and the spell broke slightly. Maya became aware again of where she was, of the coffee pot she'd set down somewhere, of the drink orders she hadn't filled. Frank was watching from the kitchen window, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I'm working," Maya said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I can't. I have a shift. I need this job." Rosa nodded, understanding but reluctant. "When do you finish?" 6 o'clock. "Then we'll wait. We'll order, we'll eat, we'll sit right here until 6 o'clock, and then we'll talk properly. Is there somewhere quiet we can go?" Maya's mind flashed through options. Her apartment was a studio above a dry cleaner, cramped and shabby, the walls thin enough to hear her neighbors' arguments. The library closed at 5. The park was too public. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. The Daily Grind. It stays open until 9. The Daily Grind, Rosa repeated, as if committing it to memory. 6 o'clock. We'll meet you there. She finally released Maya's hands, though she seemed reluctant to break the contact. "Please come. Please. Even if you have doubts, even if you think this is crazy, which I know it must seem, please give us a chance to explain." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. She bent to retrieve her fallen notepad, her hands shaking so badly that she had to try twice to pick it up. As she straightened, she caught her reflection in the window, her face pale, her eyes wide, looking like someone who had just seen a ghost or perhaps, for the first time, seen herself. She took their food orders mechanically, her pen moving across the notepad on autopilot. BLT with fries, chicken sandwich, burger medium rare. The grandmother ordered soup, chicken noodle, and crackers on the side. Maya walked to the kitchen and clipped the orders to the carousel, and Frank gave her a long look. "You okay, kid?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of contradictions. Time moved both impossibly fast and excruciatingly slow. She refilled drinks and cleared plates and rang up checks, all while hyper-aware of the family, her possible family, sitting in the booth by the window. They ate slowly, lingering over their meal in a way that suggested they would have sat there all day if necessary. Rosa kept glancing at Maya, her expression a mixture of hope and fear and something that looked like grief finally finding an outlet. Maya caught herself studying them when she thought they weren't looking. Marco had dark hair like hers, though his was curly where hers was straight. Antonio had a similar nose, slightly too large, with a bump in the bridge that suggested it had been broken once. Jennifer's laugh, when it came, was warm and genuine, the kind that made others want to smile. And Rosa had eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and hands that moved expressively when she talked, and a way of tilting her head when she listened that Maya had seen in her own reflection countless times. Mr. Patterson finally left, pressing a $5 bill into Maya's hand and patting her shoulder in a gesture of wordless support. The college students packed up their books and departed, leaving behind empty coffee cups and a generous tip. New customers came and went, the usual afternoon crowd, people whose names Maya knew, whose orders she could recite from memory, but who seemed today to exist behind glass, separated from her by the magnitude of what might be happening. At 5:30, Maya retreated to the tiny employee bathroom and stared at her reflection in the spotted mirror. She turned her left hand over, studying the birthmark she'd spent 23 years trying to hide. In the harsh fluorescent light, it looked darker than usual, more prominent, as if it had been waiting all this time to be seen, to be recognized, to be the key that unlocked everything. She thought about the file she'd read once, years ago, when she'd turned 18 and been granted access to her foster care records. Baby girl Chen, born March 17th at 3:42 a.m. at Riverside General Hospital. Mother, unknown. Father, unknown. The baby had been healthy, 7 pounds 3 ounces, left with a note that read only, "I'm sorry." Social services had placed her in emergency foster care, then moved through a series of homes. Some good, some bad, none permanent, until she'd aged out of the system at 18. She'd made a life from that. Not a good life, maybe, not the life she'd dreamed about as a kid reading books about families and adventures and homes where you belonged, but a life nonetheless. She had this job. She had her apartment. She had her routine. She didn't need more than that. She'd learned long ago not to need more than that. But standing in that bathroom, staring at her reflection, Maya felt something crack open inside her chest. Some sealed chamber she'd built to house all the questions and longings and hopes she told herself she didn't have. What if there was more? What if there had always been more, waiting for her, and all she'd needed was for an elderly woman to grab her hand in a diner on a Tuesday afternoon? At 10 minutes to 6, Frank appeared in the doorway of the bathroom, knocking gently on the open door. "Hey kid, your family's settling up. You want me to tell them anything? Your family." The words sent a shiver down Maya's spine. "No," she said quietly. I'll go meet them." She clocked out at exactly 6, hung her apron on its hook, and smoothed down her hair. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy with it. Rosa and her family were waiting by the door, Rosa's cardigan back on, her purse clutched in both hands, her eyes bright with anticipation and fear that mirrored Maya's own. "Ready?" Rosa asked softly. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice, and together they stepped out into the golden evening light of Main Street, where the shadows had grown long and the air had begun to cool and everything felt balanced on the knife edge of change. Behind them, through the diner window, Frank watched them go. He thought about the scared 21-year-old who had shown up 2 years ago asking for work. No experience but willing to learn, desperate enough that she'd worked double shifts for months to make rent. He thought about how she'd never mentioned family, never took holidays off, never had anyone pick her up after closing. And he thought about the way Rosa Rossi had looked at that girl, at Maya, as if she were seeing something precious she'd thought lost forever. The bell above the door chimed one more time, and the diner settled back into its evening rhythm, holding in its walls the echo of an impossible moment, a connection made across decades of silence, a birthmark that carried the memory of 5 generations and led, finally, to the recognition of a granddaughter who had been missing for 23 years without ever knowing she'd been lost. The daily grind occupied a corner storefront that had once been a pharmacy, back when Main Street still thrived and people did their shopping on foot, rather than driving to big box stores on the highway. The original tile floor remained, black and white hexagons worn smooth by a century of footsteps, and the exposed brick walls held vintage coffee advertisements and sepia-toned photographs of Riverside's past. The textile mill that had closed in the 70s, the railroad station that no longer saw passenger trains, the river itself in flood stages and drought, constant and changing all at once. Maya had always liked this place. It was quieter than most coffee shops, lacking the aggressive Wi-Fi crowd that camped at Starbucks for hours. The owner, a man named Dennis who'd moved here from Portland and brought with him aspirations of roasting his own beans, knew how to make a cappuccino properly, with microfoam so fine it looked like white velvet, and he never questioned why Maya sometimes sat in the corner for hours nursing a single cup, reading library books and trying to ignore the loneliness that followed her like a shadow. Now she pushed through the heavy glass door, the 5 of them, because she supposed that's what they were now. 5 people connected by biology or possibly just coincidence. And the familiar smell of espresso and cinnamon welcomed her like an old friend. Dennis looked up from behind the counter, recognized Maya, and gave her his usual nod of greeting. Then his eyes moved to the family behind her, and something in his expression shifted, became curious. "Are you regular?" he called out. Maya nodded. "And whatever they want." Rosa ordered chamomile tea. Antonio asked for black coffee. Jennifer wanted a vanilla latte. Marco, after studying the menu board with the gravity of someone making a life-altering decision, chose an iced mocha with extra whipped cream. They carried their drinks to a corner table, away from the 2 other customers. A woman typing furiously on a laptop and an elderly man reading a newspaper with a magnifying glass. For a long moment, no one spoke. They settled into their chairs, arranged their cups, went through the small rituals of preparation that gave them time to gather courage. Maya wrapped both hands around her cappuccino, feeling the warmth seep into her palms, and studied the foam pattern Dennis had made. A leaf, perfectly symmetrical, already beginning to dissolve into the coffee beneath. Rosa broke the silence. She set down her tea, reached across the table, and placed her hand palm down next to Maya's. Rosa rolled up the hem of her pants, revealing a small birthmark on the inside of her ankle bone. 5 generations, Rosa said softly. "At least 5 that we know of. My grandmother, your great-great-grandmother. She was born in Sicily in 1892. She had one on her shoulder. My mother had a small one behind her ear. I have this one. Elena had the same as yours. And now you." She paused, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered near but not touching Maya's hand. "In our family, we called it the Luna mark. The moon mark. It was supposed to be lucky." Maya stared at the 2 birthmarks side by side. Hers prominent and impossible to miss, Rosa's smaller but unmistakably similar. The rational part of her brain, the part that had learned early to distrust fairy tales and coincidences, whispered that birthmarks were common, that crescent shapes were a standard configuration, that this could all be an elaborate mistake or even a con. But another part, deeper, older, the part that still remembered being 5 years old and asking her foster mother why she didn't look like anyone else, that part wanted desperately to believe. "Tell me about Elena," Maya said quietly. "Tell me about my mother." Rosa blinked hard, her jaw setting with determination. Elena she was light itself. That's what her name means, you know, light. And she was the youngest of my 3 children. Antonio here is the oldest. Then came Maria, who lives in Seattle now, and then Elena, our surprise baby, born when I thought I was too old for more children. She smiled at the memory, though sadness tinged it. She was always singing, always. From the time she could talk, there was music pouring out of her. She wanted to study opera. Can you imagine? This little slip of a thing wanting to stand on stages and fill concert halls with her voice. Antonio spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "She was my baby sister. I was 12 when she was born, old enough that I thought babies were boring. But not Elena. She'd grab my finger and wouldn't let go, even when she was sleeping. And when she got older," he paused, clearing his throat, "she'd follow me everywhere. To baseball practice, to my friends' houses. It should have annoyed me, but it didn't. She made everything more fun just by being there." Jennifer, who had been silent until now, added gently, "I never met her. I married Antonio 5 years after she disappeared. But I've heard so many stories. The whole family, they've kept her alive in stories. How she convinced her whole kindergarten class to put on a production of The Wizard of Oz in the playground. How she rescued a 3-legged dog and insisted it was actually a magical creature in disguise. How she learned to make her grandmother's pasta sauce and then added her own twist. A little lemon zest. That made it even better. Marco, the teenager, had been quiet until now, but he leaned forward, his young face serious. There's a picture of her in Nana's living room. She's laughing, and she looks, I don't know, free, I guess, like nothing bad had ever happened to her. He glanced at Maya. You look like her. Around the eyes especially. Maya felt something twist in her chest. She thought about all the times she'd studied her own face in mirrors, trying to see where she'd come from, trying to find her origins in the curve of her cheekbones or the shape of her lips. What happened to her? You said she disappeared. How does someone just disappear? Rosa took a long breath, her hands cupping her tea as if drawing warmth from it. Elena was 19. It was the summer of 1985. She'd finished her first year of college. She was studying music at the State University, living at home to save money. She had a job at a record store downtown, one of those places with listening booths and posters of rock stars on the walls. And she'd met someone. A boy. A man, I suppose, though he was only 22. His name was David. Antonio's expression darkened. David Chen. Maya's head snapped up. Chen? That's my last name. My birth certificate says my last name is Chun. Rosa nodded slowly. We think she must have told them his name at the hospital. Or maybe he was there. We don't know. We never found him either. Tell me about him, Maya said, leaning forward. Tell me about my father. The family exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Antonio spoke, his voice tight with old anger. We didn't know much about him. Elena was secretive about the relationship, which should have been our first warning. We met him twice. He was charming, handsome. He talked about his plans. He was going to be an architect, he said, going to design buildings that would change skylines. He had that way about him, you know? Made everything sound possible. Made you want to believe him. But there were red flags, Rosa interjected. Things that worried me. He didn't like Elena spending time with us. He'd get this look on his face when she mentioned family dinners or Sunday Mass. And Elena started changing. She'd always been so open, so eager to share everything. Suddenly she was keeping secrets, making excuses, coming home late with explanations that didn't quite add up. Jennifer added quietly, Antonio found a letter once. Elena had left it in her jacket pocket, and he was hanging up the jacket and it fell out. It was from David. It was possessive, controlling. He was upset that she'd gone to lunch with a friend, a male friend from her music class, and he'd written this long thing about how much he loved her, but also how she needed to be more careful, more aware of how her actions affected him. I confronted her, Antonio said, and Maya could hear the guilt in his voice, decades old but still fresh. I showed her the letter. I told her he was bad news, that she needed to end it. We fought. God, we fought like we'd never fought before. She said I didn't understand, that David loved her, that he was just intense because he'd had a hard life. She said, he stopped, swallowed hard. She said we were trying to control her just like everyone else had always done, that she was an adult and could make her own choices. 2 weeks later, Rosa continued, her voice barely above a whisper, she told me she was pregnant. She was terrified but also radiant somehow. She said David had proposed that they were going to get married, that everything would be fine. She asked me not to tell her father yet. He'd passed away when she was 16, so it was just me and Antonio and Maria at that point. She said she'd tell everyone once they had a plan. Maya's hands had gone cold despite the warmth of the coffee cup. But you never got to meet your grandchild. No, Rosa said, and the word broke on a sob. 3 days after she told me, she was gone. She left for work one morning, June 15th, 1985. I remember it was raining, one of those early summer storms that makes everything smell like earth and ozone. She kissed my cheek at the door, told me not to worry, that she'd be home for dinner. We were going to have lasagna. It was her favorite. She never made it to work, Antonio said flatly. The record store called at 11 to ask where she was. She was never late. I got in my car and drove all over town. To the store, to David's apartment. He was gone too, the landlord said, moved out overnight without giving notice. To her friends' houses, to the university, to every place I could think of. We called the police, Rosa said. They took a report but told us that at 19, Elena was an adult. She had a right to leave if she wanted. They said she'd probably just eloped with her boyfriend, that she'd call when she was ready. But I knew. A mother knows. Something was wrong. She wouldn't have left without a word, without her clothes, without the necklace I'd given her for graduation that she never took off. We hired a private investigator, Antonio said. Spent every penny we had and then some. He traced David's movements backward. Found out he wasn't who he'd said he was. His real name wasn't even David Chen. He'd been using a fake ID. He'd moved to Riverside 6 months before meeting Elena, and before that, he'd been in California, where he'd been questioned in connection with another missing woman. Nothing had been proven, but the pattern was there. Maya felt sick. She set down her coffee cup, afraid she might drop it. He killed her. You think he killed my mother? Silence fell over the table like a shroud. Rosa reached across and took Maya's hand in both of hers, holding tight. We don't know. The investigator followed the trail as far as he could. David, or whatever his real name was, had withdrawn money from ATMs along Interstate 40, heading east. Then the trail went cold in Tennessee. No more ATM withdrawals, no credit card use, nothing. It was like they both vanished into thin air. But you were born here, Jennifer said gently. In Riverside, which means Elena made it back somehow or never left. Which means maybe she survived. For how long, though? Marco asked quietly, voicing the question they were all thinking. If she made it back to have the baby, why didn't she go home? Why would she leave Maya at the hospital? No one had an answer. They sat in the weight of decades-old questions. The mystery that had haunted the Rossi family for 40 years, now expanded to include Maya herself. Not just the granddaughter they'd never known, but a living question mark, evidence that Elena had survived long enough to give birth but had never come home. Maya pulled her hand back slowly, needing space to think. I need to know what happened. I need to know the truth about my mother, about what happened to her, and about my father, about who he really was. Rosa nodded. So do we. We never stopped looking, never stopped hoping. The investigator we hired worked the case for 3 years before he had to stop. We ran out of money. But every few years, Antonio would make calls, would check if there were any Jane does that matched Elena's description, would search for any mention of a David Chen in police records. Antonio pulled out his phone and opened a folder of photographs. He turned the screen toward Maya. This is Elena at 18, a year before she disappeared. Maya stared at the young woman on the screen. The resemblance was undeniable. The same dark hair, the same wide-set eyes, the same slightly crooked smile that Maya saw in her own reflection. But there was something else too, something in Elena's expression that Maya recognized on a deeper level. A restlessness, a hunger for something more than what she had, an openness to possibility that made her vulnerable. She looks happy, Maya said softly. She was, Rosa said. Despite everything, despite the control and the secrets and the fear we didn't see clearly enough, she was happy. She believed in love. She believed in second chances and silver linings and that everything happened for a reason. She was... Rosa's voice broke completely. She was supposed to have more time. Maya swiped through the other photos. Elena at her high school graduation, wearing a white dress and holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Elena at Christmas, surrounded by open presents, laughing at something off camera. Elena at the beach, wet hair plastered to her head, making a silly face at the photographer. Elena, Elena, Elena. A whole life captured in fragments. A person Maya had never met but came from, whose blood ran through her veins, whose birthmark she carried like a genetic signature. I don't remember anything, Maya said finally. I mean, I was a baby, so obviously I wouldn't. But there's nothing. No first memory of her face, no sense of her voice. It's like I appeared in the world fully formed at whatever age I can remember from. 3 maybe or 4. There's just nothing before that. Rosa's hands were shaking as she set down her teacup. Tell us about you. Tell us about your life. Please. We've spent 40 years wondering, hoping, grieving. And now you're here and you're real and you're—" She gestured helplessly. "You're Elena's daughter. You're part of us. We want to know everything." Where did Maya even start? How did she condense 23 years of foster homes and social workers and schools where she was always the new kid into something coherent? But she tried. She told them about her first clear memory. A yellow kitchen in a house she couldn't remember the address of, sitting at a table eating pancakes that were too cold. A foster mother's voice from another room talking on the phone about the Chen girl and whether the placement would work out. She told them about learning early not to get attached to things. Toys, clothes, even books, because she might have to leave them behind at any moment. She told them about the foster family that had kept her for 5 years, the longest stretch, where she'd had her own room painted purple and a foster sister who'd taught her to braid hair, and how she'd let herself believe that maybe this was forever, right up until the day the social worker came with garbage bags for her belongings and explained that the family was moving to Oregon and couldn't take her. She told them about high school, about being smart enough to do well academically but never feeling like she belonged anywhere, about joining clubs that fizzled out, making friends who drifted away, learning to be okay with being alone because alone was the only constant. She told them about turning 18 and aging out of the system, about the apartment she'd shared with 2 other girls in the same situation, about working 3 jobs to afford community college classes. I need to continue the story. We're only at about 4,447 words total so far, and the requirement is 20,000 to 22,000 words. Let me continue from where I left off in section 2. Eventually had to drop because she couldn't balance work and studying when every shift meant the difference between making rent and being evicted. She told them about the string of jobs, retail, fast food, cleaning offices at night, each one paying just enough to survive but never enough to get ahead. About the studio apartment above the dry cleaner that smelled perpetually of chemicals and steam. About the particular loneliness of holidays, when the diner closed and she had nowhere to go. I learned not to ask questions about my past, Maya said, staring into her now cold coffee. When I was younger, I'd ask foster parents if they knew anything about my real family, but it always made them uncomfortable, like I was saying they weren't enough. So I stopped asking. I read my file once when I turned 18. It didn't say much. Just then my mother left me with a note that said, "I'm sorry." That was it. 2 words. Not even "I love you" or "I'll come back," or anything that suggested she'd wanted to keep me. Rosa made a wounded sound, her hand pressing to her chest. Elena loved you. She must have. Everything we knew about her. She wouldn't have abandoned you willingly. Something happened. Something forced her to leave you there. Or someone did, Antonio said darkly. Maya looked at each of them in turn. These people who were strangers and yet somehow not, whose faces held echoes of her own, whose history she'd unknowingly been carrying in her DNA all along. What happens now? I mean, assuming this is real, assuming I really am Elena's daughter. What are we supposed to do with that information? We get to know each other, Rosa said firmly. We become family. Real family. You've been alone for 23 years, Maya. That ends today. Right now. It's not that simple, Maya said, and she heard the defensive edge in her voice, the armor she'd built over years of disappointments sliding into place. I have a life. I have responsibilities. I don't even know you. Then let us change that, Jennifer said gently. No pressure. No expectations. Just let us be here. Let us try. Marco, who'd been quiet for a while, spoke up. You could come to Sunday dinner. Nana makes enough food to feed an army. There's always too much pasta and everybody talks over each other, and my Aunt Maria calls from Seattle on speakerphone and it's loud and chaotic and... He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. It's family. You could see what it's like. Maya felt tears burning at the back of her throat. Sunday dinners. Family. The words carried weight she wasn't sure she could bear. What if she went and didn't fit? What if she tried and it didn't work? What if she let herself hope and then, as had happened so many times before, it all fell apart? But what if it didn't? I work Sundays, she said weakly. Double shifts. The diner's busiest day. Then Saturday, Rosa said immediately. Or Monday. Or Tuesday at midnight. I don't care. Pick a time, anytime, and we'll be there. Please, Maya, give us a chance. The door to the coffee shop opened, bringing with it a gust of cool evening air and a couple laughing about something. Dennis called out a greeting. The woman at the laptop closed it with a decisive snap and began packing up her things. Normal life continued around them, indifferent to the magnitude of what was happening at this corner table. Maya thought about her empty apartment, about heating up a frozen dinner and eating it in front of her secondhand TV, about going to bed alone and waking up alone and spending another day serving other people while her own life remained on hold, waiting for something she'd never been able to name. Saturday, she heard herself say. I'm off Saturday. I could come for a few hours. Rosa's face transformed, years seeming to fall away as joy overtook grief. Saturday. Yes. Oh, Maya. Thank you. Thank you. They exchanged numbers, Rosa insisting on programming hers into Maya's phone personally, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar technology until Marco gently took over. They made plans, Rosa's house, 3 o'clock, just a casual meal, nothing formal, no pressure. Antonio gave Maya the address and directions, and Jennifer asked about dietary restrictions, and Marco mentioned that Rosa's lasagna was legendary. And through it all Maya felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, agreeing to things that terrified her, stepping toward a future she couldn't predict. When they finally stood to leave, Rosa pulled Maya into another embrace, and this time Maya's arms came up on their own, returning it. Rosa smelled like lavender and tea and something else, something that Maya's hindbrain recognized before her conscious mind did, something that whispered, safe, home, yours. We won't let you down, Rosa whispered against Maya's hair. I promise you, we won't abandon you. Not again. Never again. They left in a cluster of warmth and goodbyes and promises to text later, the bell above the door chiming behind them. Maya stood alone in the coffee shop, Dennis giving her a curious look from behind the counter, the evening settling into its quiet rhythm. She looked down at her left hand, at the birthmark that had always made her feel marked in the wrong way. Damaged, imperfect, different. The Luna mark, Rosa had called it. Lucky. Maya left the coffee shop and walked home through the deepening twilight, the streetlights flickering on one by one, Main Street settling into its evening self. She passed the hardware store where she'd bought a plunger last month, the barber shop where Mr. Patterson got his hair cut every other Tuesday, the flower shop that was already closed, buckets of unsold flowers wilting slightly in the fading light. When she reached her building, she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, unlocked the 3 locks she'd installed herself, and stepped into the familiar cramped space. But it looked different somehow. The same furniture, the same dishes in the sink, the same stack of library books on the table, but different. As if knowing she might belong somewhere had changed how she saw the place where she didn't. She sat on her bed and pulled out her phone. Rosa had already texted. Thank you for giving us a chance. Sleep well. We're thinking of you. Maya stared at the message for a long time. Then, slowly, she typed back. Thank you for finding me. She lay back on her bed, still in her work clothes. Somewhere in this town, the truth waited, about what had happened to Elena, about whether this fragile new connection to the Rossi family could survive the weight of all that grief and mystery. But for tonight, for this moment, Maya let herself feel something she'd spent a lifetime refusing to feel. Hope. Outside her window, the night deepened. Somewhere a dog barked. Someone's television played too loud through thin walls. Car headlights swept across her ceiling as vehicles passed below. The ordinary sounds of ordinary life in an ordinary town where extraordinary things had happened, were happening, might yet happen. Maya fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she dreamed not of being lost, but of being found. If you're wondering what Maya discovers when she meets the Rossi family for that Saturday dinner, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this story unfolds. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This investigation is about to get even more intense. The next 3 days at the diner passed in a strange, suspended state. Maya moved through her shifts on autopilot, her body performing tasks her mind barely registered. Coffee pot, notepad, smile, clear table, wipe down, repeat. But her thoughts were elsewhere, circling endlessly around Saturday, around the Rossi family, around a mother she'd never known and a grandmother who'd grabbed her hand and recognized her across 4 decades of absence. Frank noticed. "You've been spacey," he said on Thursday afternoon, catching her staring out the window for the 3rd time in an hour. "Everything okay?" Maya almost told him. The words gathered behind her teeth. "I found my family. Or they found me. I don't know which." But saying it out loud felt like it might break the spell, might reveal the whole thing to be an elaborate mistake or dream. So instead she said, "Just tired. Haven't been sleeping well. Take Saturday off if you need," Frank offered, surprising her. "Betty can cover." "Actually," Maya said slowly, "I already asked for Saturday off. I have plans." Frank's eyebrows rose. Maya never had plans. "Good," he said gruffly. "It's about time." That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Maya did something she hadn't done in years. She Googled her own name. Maya Chen, Riverside. The results were sparse. A white pages listing her address. An old mention in a community college newsletter about students who'd made the dean's list before she'd dropped out. Nothing else. She was a ghost in the digital age, leaving no footprints. Then she tried Elena Rossi missing 1985 Riverside. The results came flooding back, and Maya's heart hammered as she scrolled through them. Newspaper articles from the Riverside Chronicle, archived and digitized. Local woman missing. Family seeks information. Search continues for pregnant teen. Missing woman's case gone cold after 6 months. Maya clicked on the first article and saw her mother's face staring back at her. A formal photo, probably from high school graduation. Elena wearing a black gown and a cautious smile. The article detailed the basics. Elena Maria Rossi, 19, last seen June 15, 1985, approximately 6 months pregnant, believed to be with boyfriend David Chen, real name unknown. Anyone with information should contact the Riverside Police Department. Maya Chen, a 23-year-old waitress at Rosie's Diner, lives a solitary life defined by her mysterious origins. Abandoned as an infant at Riverside Hospital in March 1985, she has no knowledge of her family history, until fate intervenes when Rosa and Antonio Rossi recognize a crescent-shaped birthmark on her hand, identical to one their missing daughter Elena possessed. The Rossis approach Maya cautiously, explaining that their daughter Elena disappeared in June 1985, 6 months pregnant, with a man named David Chen. Elena was 19, and the family had been searching for her, and potentially a grandchild, for 40 years. Maya initially reacts with skepticism and fear, overwhelmed by the possibility that her solitary existence might suddenly be connected to a tragic mystery. However, the undeniable evidence of the Luna mark, combined with Maya's birthdate and location, makes the connection compelling. Maya conducts her own research, discovering newspaper archives chronicling Elena's disappearance. The coverage diminished over time. Initial articles detailed search efforts and family pleas, but within months, the story faded to nothing. She also finds a brief mention of her own beginning, 3 sentences about an abandoned infant at Riverside General, deemed healthy and placed with social services. The contrast between Elena's vibrant life in family photographs and Maya's anonymous start devastates her. Despite her anxiety, Maya accepts Rosa's invitation to Saturday dinner. She arrives at the yellow house with white trim to find a warm, chaotic family eager to embrace her. The meal is overwhelming, course after course of homemade Italian food, including Elena's perfected lasagna recipe with its secret ingredients of fresh basil and nutmeg. The family treats Maya with genuine affection, showing her photo albums chronicling Elena's life from childhood through her pregnancy. Rosa and Antonio make clear that Elena wanted her baby desperately. Whatever circumstances led to Maya's abandonment, they insist it couldn't have been Elena's choice. The family also shares their desire to reopen the investigation into Elena's disappearance, now that Maya's existence provides new evidence that Elena had returned to Riverside or never left. Maya agrees to help search for the truth, understanding that any answer, even a painful one, is better than the limbo of not knowing. The evening transforms from a tentative first meeting into a planning session. with family members energized by renewed purpose after 40 years of stagnation. Following the dinner, Maya's life shifts fundamentally. She now has family, history, and purpose beyond mere survival. Antonio connects with Tom Bradley, the retired detective who worked Elena's original case, arranging a meeting. He also shares the original missing person report with Maya, revealing that David Chen likely used an alias, paid cash, and vanished without a trace along with his dark blue Chevrolet Cavalier. The report describes Elena's last known moments. Leaving home at 8 a.m. on June 15, 1985, 6 months pregnant, possibly with Chun. His apartment was found vacant, his identity untraceable. The one existing photograph shows him as charming and ordinary. Someone's nice boyfriend, Maya observes, which Antonio confirms made him dangerous. The Rossi family transforms their dining room into an investigation headquarters. Rosa organizes photographs chronologically, Jennifer creates a detailed timeline, and Marco researches modern forensic tools unavailable in 1985. He suggests DNA testing through genealogy databases, which could potentially match Maya to unidentified remains if Elena's body was found but never identified. Maya courageously volunteers for DNA testing despite her terror. The family also investigates hospital records, learning that while detailed medical records from Maya's birth are likely destroyed, birth certificates and basic intake information should still exist, potentially providing crucial witnesses or information about the circumstances of her abandonment. The narrative explores identity, family, and the weight of unsolved mysteries. Maya evolves from someone defined by absence, no family, no history, no prospects, into Elena Rossi's daughter, with inherited recipes, shared features, and a grandmother's fierce love. The crescent-shaped birthmark, initially just a physical characteristic, becomes the lunar mark, a symbol of connection spanning generations. The story balances hope with dread. While the Rossis offer Maya belonging and purpose, the search for truth may uncover tragedy. Yet all agree that knowledge, however painful, surpasses the torture of perpetual uncertainty. Maya's transformation from isolated waitress to active participant in solving her mother's disappearance represents both a homecoming and the beginning of a potentially devastating journey toward truth. What do you think happened to Elena Rossi? Do you believe she's still alive somewhere? Or did something tragic occur that June day in 1985? Share your theories in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who loves real-life mysteries. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of families reunited and mysteries solved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.